Juvenile Huntington's disease has been part of our family for the last 23 years, and before then, Huntington's disease for the past 25 years, so nearly a total of half a century that we have had this uninvited guest in our lives. On the day of Sheenam's dad's funeral, on the 14th of October 2002, family and friends were gathered around the coffin, but there was no sight of Sheenam anywhere. It was so embarrassing. Everybody was around, but we were looking for Sheenam. When she came back, I was really angry inside, but held it together, as we do in public, and soaked in the anger. It was only some time after, when I sat with Sheenam and I said, "What possessed you to go and have a coffee with a friend on the day that your dad's funeral is and the coffin is at home?" She then said, "Mum, I didn't want to tell you because I wanted to do this alone. I'd been to go and get the result of my genetic testing." My whole world fell apart. I remember that day vividly. He says, Mummy, I've got juvenile Huntington's disease." My eldest daughter ran to the kitchen and was violently sick. My son, who was barely 14, fainted, and I didn't know which child to go to first. That moment changed our lives. It was hard enough grieving for my husband and for the children for the loss of their father. However, this tsunami that had hit us, couldn't make sense of it. I really couldn't make sense of it. And it was the hardest thing to deal with. I'd never heard of juvenile Huntington's disease. It was bad enough when my husband was diagnosed in the 1990s, when the gene had just been about identified. And we had never seen anybody with Huntington's disease. And when it came to Sheenam, the consultant said she's the only one in the area that we know of. It was so isolating, not being able to share, not being able to learn, not being able to know what the future held, especially when they said that with juvenile Huntington's disease, that it's much more severe and a much shorter lifespan. My little girl had carried all this weight on her shoulders. I must admit, at the time, I was a little bit sad that she hadn't shared that she was going through the genetic testing process. However, later, I've been reflecting on that and realising that actually that was her choice, and she had her reasons for doing what she did in private without sharing with me. Fortunately, she was able to share with a friend who went with her. And Sheenam is such a caring daughter, and I think probably she just thought it was going to be too much for me to take on, and so she took it upon herself. I do really now believe, looking back, that each person has a right to make a decision on or if they are tested, and not to share that with their parents or siblings or anybody. It is hard. It is hard as a mother to know or feel that you've been left out of something so important in a child's life. But it was her decision.